My name is Tim Gill. I'm speaking to you from London, England. I'm an independent researcher and writer, and I make the case for children's outdoor play and children's mobility. Talking to you about building child-friendly cities. How do we do this? Why does it matter? And I'm going to be drawing on a book that I wrote, came out earlier this year, called Urban Playground: How Child-Friendly Planning and Design Can Save Cities. And the book is based on research and visits to about 12 cities around the world that have all taken seriously the goal of making neighborhoods, streets, parks, squares, public spaces better for children. And you can see the cities on the map here, and you'll see that two of the cities are Brazilian cities. So I like to think this is an approach that can work in any city, and I was pleased to have some cities from Brazil in my studies. But when we're thinking about children and their relationship to the people and places around them, I think it's good to think about our own childhoods and what our childhoods were like, where we could go and what we could do when we were young, and how that's been changing. So my next slide brings out a really important insight. So what you're looking here is a slide of a map. It's a map that shows you what you might call the roaming range or the home territory of 4 children. But they're all 8 years old, but they're in 4 generations of the same family, and they all grew up in the same city. So you can see this big area in the map. This is the home territory of the great-grandfather in this family at the age of 8. He could travel 6 miles, 10 kilometers across the city on his own. And then you can see how the home territory shrinks with each generation until here you can see the yellow dot. This is the son today. He's actually allowed to go to the end of his street. And we know that's more right to roam. That's more everyday freedom than most 8-year-old children have today. So this map tells a story of the shrinking horizons of childhood. And I think it's one of the most important features of childhood today. And it's one of the most underexplored. And it's happening around the world. And one of the reasons it's happening is because of the way we build and design our towns and cities and neighborhoods. And this is a starting off point for a conversation about how we can make cities better for children. So I want to talk more about this idea of child-friendly planning. What do I mean by child-friendly planning? What is a child-friendly place? Well, this next slide shows you that really there are 3 parts or pillars that make places, neighborhoods work well for families. The first, of course, is housing. If you don't have housing that's right for families, then families will not live there. You also need services for families. You need schools, you need hospitals, you need childcare. But you also need this third pillar, and this is the public realm, the streets, the parks, the green spaces. And it's this third aspect, the public space, that I focus on in my work. And the reason is because I think it's only when children get beyond their homes and their schools and childcare that they really become citizens and they claim their place in our communities. So I think it's the most interesting and the most telling aspect of children's lives. I set out a framework for child-friendly planning, and the framework has 2 dimensions, and this slide captures them. And this is the most important diagram in the whole book. It's about what makes a neighborhood work well for children, what makes it child-friendly. And the first dimension is, of course, things to do. No child wants to live in a neighborhood that has nothing to do. So the more things to do, the better. And that's one dimension. But the second dimension is just as important. And that's the mobility dimension. How easy is it for children to get around a neighborhood, especially to get around on foot or by bicycle, because of course children themselves cannot drive. So it's only where you have both a lot of things to do and a high level of mobility for children, especially by walking or cycling, that you're in this child-friendly city or child-friendly neighborhood. But what does this mean in practice? What does it look like? Well, in my book, I choose one neighborhood that I say could be perhaps the ultimate child-friendly neighborhood. And I'm going to show you some pictures of it now. So this is a district called Vauban, and it's part of the German city of Freiburg. And you can see an image there. It's apartment living. It's a medium density district. It's a mixed use district. There's shopping and employment as well as housing. But the key thing about Vauban, the thing that makes it very child friendly, to all intents and purposes, it is a car-free neighborhood. Very few families and households own a car. If they do own a car, then they have to store their car in a car park around the edge of the district. So the whole of the space between the buildings is available for the public, for children and families to enjoy. So I'll show you a few more photos. Here is a green space that's outside some of the apartments, and there's a lot of green space in this neighborhood, but there aren't separate play areas. There are play features and offers woven throughout the space. And here is one of the streets in Vauban, and you can see it's very livable, it's safe, and I've been lucky enough to visit Vauban twice, and each time it's been amazing to see the sheer life in the streets, the number of people, children, different ages, with and without their carers, who are being active and playing and getting around that neighborhood. So that's the picture I want you to have in your mind. When I came to visit Recife in Brazil a couple of years ago, of course it's very different, but one thing that struck me that's quite similar is that even some of the poorer areas, this is Iputinga, actually have some of the same characteristics. The traffic levels are low, the neighborhoods are compact, they're mixed use, and I did also see families and children out and about. So of course I'm not saying that life is wonderful or perfect, but there are some interesting parallels between the qualities of some cities and neighborhoods in Brazil and some of what you would say would be good for children. Of course, there are some problems as well. But when I came to Recife, this is a city that has really had a strong focus on child development and child health, but also making neighborhoods work better for children. So I heard about a new park for the city, the Caparibe Park. And this is a Baobab Park, which is one of the first pieces of this big jigsaw of the new park in the city. And it's a very child-friendly place. And I also heard about squares and play spaces that are being improved. This is also in Iputinga on the left, and it's part of a neighborhood that also has several schools and other public spaces, and they're also working to join these up with good connections. And on the right, you can see one of the hillside favelas, where as part of a favela improvement program, the spaces, just a small space has been created, but it's so important for the children in this neighborhood. And I briefly mentioned earlier, Fortaleza is a city that's really having a strong focus on road safety and tackling traffic danger, again, because it has a tragic impact on children's lives. And one of the initiatives is to build out pop-up squares and low-cost initiatives to slow the traffic, but also open up the neighborhoods to create spaces where children can play and people can socialize. So that's the picture. But why does this idea matter? Why is it important? Well, I asked this when I went to the cities that I visited, and the cities and the city leaders really came up with three reasons, three rationales for investing in child-friendly planning. The first was really quite a hard-nosed and economic rationale. And this is that cities need to get families to come and to stay. And I devote a whole chapter in my book to Rotterdam, which is a good example of this. The second group of cities were interested in sustainability and the environment, and they realized that if we ask ourselves what a child-friendly neighborhood looks like, it looks a lot like a sustainable neighborhood. It's compact, it's green, walking and cycling are easy. And then there's a third group of cities, like Recife and Fortaleza, that had a strong focus on children's health and well-being. But the interesting thing about this diagram and the cities that I visited, you can see here most of the cities, over half, actually had multiple reasons. There was a sense that there were win-wins, that by making places child-friendly, you can improve health of children and make them more sustainable, or you can also address economic concerns. And I think that's a really valuable insight. It's captured in the quote, famous quote from Enrique Peñalosa, the former mayor of Bogotá, who talked about children being an indicator species. And I think that is literally true. As I've said before, if we see children of different ages active and visible in a neighborhood, it's a sign of the health of that habitat, in just the same way that if you see salmon swimming up a river. I just want to share one implementation point, a model for you that I think will get this to happen in different neighborhoods and in municipalities. And it's what I call a hub and spoke model. And at the heart of the model is a municipal team or person who makes things happen, who can liaise with transport and planning, who can help to involve local people, who can focus on residential neighborhoods, who can build investments in both transport and mobility and spaces, and who can measure the impact of what they're doing. So I want to give the last word in my talk to one of the parents, one of the women that I met when I visited Recife and the hillside favelas. Mrs. Jasaira Alves, who talked about how between 4 and 5 in the afternoon, all the families come out and play with their children on the new playing verandas that were created. She said it's so beautiful that I'm almost crying, and she really was. And I can't think of a better way to capture all of the reasons why a child-friendly approach to planning and design can have such a powerful impact on the lives of children and families. Muito obrigado. Thank you very much.